I look like an absolute hot mess, but I've just spent the last hour and a half purging my bookshelves. So we are gonna do an unhaul. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is for Pause in a Book. I make bookish videos over here on my little corner of the internet. So if that is something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit the subscribe button down below. I have over 50 books here to unhaul today. I'm gonna try to have some semblance of an order, like going from genre to genre. I make no promises though. Like I said, over 50 books. Most of these books will be on Pango. However, I am filming this a little bit early, so no promises if they're still there. But I do think that this is going to take me a while to put up on Pango, so they're going to go up in waves. Let's start with a couple of thriller and horror books. The first one is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. I read this one last spooky season. I buddy read it with Michelle, and the book was fine. It was like no plot, just vibes kind of thing, and I wanted to keep it for a really long time because it's just so pretty. I thought there was something on the naked cover. There's not. But this book is gorgeous. I was like, I'm gonna keep it for Instagram. But then I never actually did anything with it. I never took any pictures on Instagram with it. I never did anything. It's sitting on a shelf that's actually partially obstructed by my reading chair, so I'm not even displaying it. So I'm gonna let it go to a home that will love it. Then We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. I read this one last summer, I believe, and again, it was fine. I honestly didn't realize that I still had it on my shelves until I was going through it today. So I think I gave it 3 stars. It's a bizarre book. The theme of today's video is going to be this book was just fine for pretty much any book that I have read. I've decided I'm not keeping books if I think that I can sell them if I didn't rate them high or if I'm not going to reread them. That's the case for this one, All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. I actually really liked her debut book, but this one I think fell a little bit flat for me, which I think is an unpopular opinion. I think most people really loved this book, but I didn't. It's fine. Then I have some thrillers that I have no idea what they are. The House in the Orchard by Elizabeth Brooks. I actually don't know if this is a thriller or not. I think it's about a woman who inherits a house from World War II. I got this in my aardvark box, which they gifted to me for promotion, and like I wasn't able to pick the books that I wanted. They just kind of sent me something, and I don't think I'm gonna read this one. There's a couple of domestic thrillers that were still on my shelf, and that's just not something that I am really into anymore. Reconstructing Amelia by Kimberly McCreight, I think is about a woman who like gets a phone call from her daughter's private school saying her daughter went missing or something like that. I don't know. And then The Starter Wife by Nina Lauren is about a suspected drowning of a woman, but then like she's found. I don't know, but like domestic thrillers are just not something that I necessarily gravitate towards anymore. I have The Turnout by Megan Abbott. I actually just recently read this a couple of weeks ago. It was like my lowest rated book on Goodreads, and rightfully so. I gave it 2 stars. It was so boring. It's about a ballet studio where there is a like fire and they're like suspecting the contractor. It's a really weird thing. I don't know. I was so bored. The Cost of Knowing by Brittany Morris. I actually loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. It actually was one of my favorite books of the year, but my YA books are sitting on the bottom shelf and I'm not going to reread this book anymore, so I'm going to let it go to somebody who really will love it. We have Sizzle Reel by Carolyn Greenwald, like another book that I just recently read and really didn't like. This is about a woman who comes out as bi at 24, and there's a lot of things that like she should have talked to her therapist about rather than writing a book. The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund broke up. I enjoyed this one. I thought it was fun, but it's not one that I'm going to reread, and my romance shelf is getting very large, and I needed to like cull it a little bit. The Silver Linings Playbook. I've read this so long ago and I'm not going to reread it. Honestly, the movie is better. The Last True Poets of the Sea and The How and the Why, kind of the same thing as The Cost of Knowing. These are both books that I really loved and enjoyed several years ago, but I'm not going to reread them, and I would rather them go to someone who is going to love them. I'm getting rid of a ton of contemporary fiction or literary fiction because that is just not a genre that I gravitate towards. Dear Edward by Anne Napolitano was a Book of the Month book from a long time ago, and I think this is about like an airplane crash. I travel too much for that to be a thing that I need to read. True Biz by Sarah Novick is about like a school for the deaf, I think. And it sounded really interesting when I picked it up. But again, it's just not one that I'm gravitating towards. I have so many books that I want to read or that I need to read for videos, and this isn't fitting into that. I can find it at the library or on Scribd if I need to. Sweet Bitter by Stephanie Danler. This sounds interesting actually, and this is one that I was hesitating. This is about like a bunch of restaurant workers like in the early 2000s in New York, and like the underbelly of the service industry is like a interesting story, but I think it does better in visual media, not necessarily in book form. So I think I would be like comparing it to shows and movies that are like that instead of, you know, and then I would be disappointed by the book because the book would be much slower. Hi Schmidt, are you gonna come help me? You stink. Okay, go. Hi. Hi. All right, go. Go on. Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I'm not gonna read this series. I watched the movie. That's enough. Signal Fires by Dani Shapiro is actually one that I got in an accidental book of the month because they sent me the wrong books. So I have no idea what this is about. Sky Falling by Mia McKenzie I think is queer, honestly, but it's just like a slice of life type story, and that's not something that I gravitate towards anymore. When We Were Bright and Beautiful by Jillian Madoff I think was also in that accidental box. I'm pretty sure this is rich people problems, and that is an absolute anti-buzzword. The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner I think is about women in prison? Question mark? I don't know. Not a clue. The Reckless Oath We Made by Bren Greenwood. This is the same person that wrote All the Ugly and Wonderful Things, and this was actually on my books that were going to self-destruct, so I'm just going to self-destruct it early because this sounds like a really depressing novel, and it's not one that I necessarily want to be in the headspace for. And then another one that makes me really sad because I absolutely love this cover, and that is The People We Keep by Allison Larkin. Again, it's a slice of life type story. I got a couple of classics or little like stories about retellings of classic Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. I don't know why I own this. The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This was for a video project, and that video got scrapped, and so I don't know when I would read this. Also, the audiobook is on Hoopla. The 57 Bus by Dashka Slater is another book that I was going to do for a project, and it's a nonfiction, I believe. Question mark? I don't know. It's been sitting on my shelf for years. I don't know that I will read it. Camp by Elsie Rosen is a like queer coming of age YA story, which I know is an important story for people, but not what I would give this 3 stars. Okay. And I actually like had the ability to read this during Scatagorathon, like it came up as a prompt, and I decided to not. So that kind of told me I wasn't gonna read it. The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I read this very early this year or possibly late last year for the Goodreads Choice Awards. This book was pretty good. I think I gave it 4 stars, but I really just don't like my romances in hardcover. So I am gonna let this one go. And then we have A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This one I know a lot of people really love, and I've heard really good things about it, but it's historical fiction or historical romance, which is not a favorite of mine. It's not a favorite timeline of mine. And also I don't love Alexis Hall's writing. I think that they're too wordy, they're too long. I mean, this thing is chunky. So this audiobook is on Scribd. I can find it if I want to, but I don't need to own it physically. All right, let's do some fantasy books. Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. I read this for Tour.comathon and I thought it was pretty good, but I don't need to keep it. This one is an ARC, so I won't be able to sell it. I'll put it in my little free library. But Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh. This one was disappointing. I think this one would have been really good if it was actually a YA book, but it was marketed as adult. But the character was really naive and it was really annoying being in her head. So I gave it like 2.5 stars, I think, question mark. I'm not really sure. But it was a very forgettable book. A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. I did read this for my Unhaul project and then decided to unhaul it anyways. This is a like retelling of Alice in Wonderland meets like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and the book was fine. If you like YA kind of like urban fantasy, you might like that. The Never King by Nikki St. Crow. I read this during Smut Den and the book was fine. Like it was 3 stars. This is the epitome of a book that exists in my Reddit. I have no thoughts. But I'm not going to continue on with the series. Cats Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. I read this one for my Taylor Swift vlog, and I didn't love this one. This one was not the book I should have chosen for this. And then Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. The only reason I'm putting this one in my unhaul is I got the like orange and purple floppy paperback, and so I'm gonna get rid of this one so that way my covers will match. A couple of Spiffbo books that I read last year and am not going to continue on with the series. Fire of the Forebears by L.A. Buck. This one I didn't end up loving that much, and also the author sadly passed away, and so I'm not going to be able to, like, the series isn't going to continue. So I'm going to pass this one along. Also Scales and Sensibility by Stephanie Burgess. This is like a Regency era, like Regency romance, but with dragons. You'll see a theme coming up. I don't really like Regency romance. So I'm not going to continue on with the series, despite the dragon being very cute in this book. I'm going to get rid of Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. People love this book. And this book, I think I gave 4 stars. I enjoyed it, but I don't know that I want to continue on with the series. And I know that might hurt some people, but again, Regency romance. I found that I'm just not as attached to this book, this series, as other people are. I've seen people like gush about this book post me reading it, and I was like, oh, I really wish I would have gotten that out of that book. So I'm gonna pass it along to somebody who hopefully will love it. The Keeper 6 by Kate Elliott. I actually just hauled this book. It was in like a recent haul that I did, but I read it and I didn't like it. I unfortunately did not like it. So I mean, it's a brand new copy, so I'll at least be able to get something for it on Pango. Burning Roses by S.L. Huang. I read this one for a project, and it was fine. This is like a fairy tale retelling, but in the sense of like 2 older fairy tale characters that are like rehashing war stories. It was kind of fun, but like it kind of tried to do too much in a very short amount of time, so it was 3 stars. Also Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker. This is like the novella series that's within the Middle Game, and maybe perhaps the reason why I didn't love this one so much is I haven't read Middle Game yet, but this is truly a book that exists and I read it. I do not remember anything about it, and I probably won't continue on with this series. The Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Revis. I read this one for my Star Wars vlog. It was my least favorite of them, so of the 3, this is the one that I'm going to be getting rid of. It was fine. It is the Han and Leia like post episode 6 romance. It's fine. I found another Spiffbo book, The 13th Hour by Trudy Skies. I thought for a bit I wanted to continue on with the series, but I think this book is way overwritten and just not my favorite. So they're better things. And then Love After the End, an anthology of two-spirit indigiqueer speculative fiction by Joshua Whitehead. I actually really enjoyed this one, but it's not a book that I'm going to reread, so I'm going to pass it along. Okay, last stack, but I haven't read any of these, so I don't know what they are. I mean, they're all fantasy or sci-fi, but I don't know anything about them. Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman. This is a like YA spooky season type read, and I've had this on my shelf for multiple spooky seasons and I haven't wanted to read it, so it's probably not gonna happen. In Deeper Waters by F.T. Lukens. This is like a queer pirate romance. It seems like it would be cute, but I've just heard very middle of the road reviews about it. So, The Archived by Victoria Schwab. This is one of her earlier books, and I think it's a very young YA book. So, probably not gonna like it. How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. Listen, I've had this book on so many TBRs, and every time I put it on a TBR, everyone's like, you shouldn't read that. So I'm gonna listen to them, and I'm gonna unhaul it. Pet by Akweke Emeze. I've read one other thing by them and I didn't really enjoy it, and I know that this is a very different book than that one, but it's been on my shelf for years and I'm gonna just let somebody else have it. A Marvelous Light by Freya Marska. I've heard very mixed reviews about this one. I know it's a queer fantasy romance, but again, I think it's kind of Regency based. So not necessarily one that I'm gonna love. I don't know. I've just heard very middle of the road things about it. And I wasn't excited. I had it on my April or May TBR, I can't remember. And I was just not excited to read it at all. So that pretty much gave me a clue. Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. This is a like Flintlock fantasy story, and I got this for the Backlist Book Club and then they didn't like it. And I'm pretty convinced that if Cassidy definitely doesn't like a book that's like hard fantasy, I really won't like it. So, I don't think I'm gonna like this one. I have Star Daughter. This is the really pretty, like, I think Owl Crate or Illuma Crate. Owl Crate. But I'm not gonna read. This is a YA, like, celestial sci-fi story. If I read this, I will give it 3 stars. I'm pretty sure. So we'll let somebody else read it that loves it. The Way of the Stars by Kay Ankrum has been on my TBR since 2018, probably. Like, for so long, and I've never really been excited to pick it up, so I'm just gonna unhaul it at this point. I think it's been in unhauls before, and then I've saved it. The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I started reading this one with Brittany and her book club, I think a couple months ago, and I was so bored and so confused. So, I put it down because of other books I needed to read for videos, and then never really was excited to pick it up again. Wayward by Amelia Hart. I will admit this is 100% a cover buy. Like, the aesthetic on this book is gorgeous, but I am finding that magical realism and this, like, fantastic realism, whatever we want to call it, is not the subgenre for me. So, I'm not going to enjoy this. There's also, like, 3 timelines, and one of them is World War II, which is pretty much my least favorite timeline to read in any literature. So, we're just going to skip it. The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. I heard very mixed reviews about this book, and people that I have pretty similar taste to in a lot of things, but specifically fantasy, gave it a 3 or 3.5 stars. And I was like, well, I don't have time for that. And then Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Barron. I've again had this book on several TBRs. It's been in unhauls and I've saved it, but I haven't really heard a raving review about this book. And then Beyond the Black Door by A.M. Strickland. This is really, honestly, because I was disappointed by Court of the Undying Seasons. And I read 100 pages of this book, I think it was last year, and then put it down, picked other things up, and then never went back to this. And I think it was because the pacing was slow, which is the complaint I have about Court of the Undying Season, is the pacing is so, like, up and down. So I'm afraid that this one will also be that too. I know that A.M. Strickland has some really, really good representation, specifically when it comes to queer identities. But unfortunately, like, Court of the Undying Seasons was disappointing, to say at best. And I'm afraid that this one will as well, even though I've heard that there's some really good ace representation in this. So someone else will love it. That is my unhaul. Please don't try to save the books in the comments. My TBR number is way too high. I need to do the math and count which ones of these were on my TBR. But I have to get it down by the end of the year, so I cannot save the books. All right. Well, that is all I have for you today. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed, there is a little button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. The link to my Pingo is also down in the description below. So if you'd like to see if any of these books are still in my shop, you can check it out there if you are US based. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.